There we go. Are we on? Testing. All right, there we go. I'm Perry Atkinson. Welcome to Focus Today. Well, we are delighted to have with us today Matthew Clark. He's Associate Counsel for Government Affairs and also Media Advocacy. He is with the ACLJ in Washington, D.C. Perhaps you have read some of his articles that he's published in the Washington Post and also on the ACLJ's docket blog. But today I wanted to find out what's going on with this proposed lawsuit against the president by the U.S. Speaker of the House, John Boehner. So, Matthew, nice to have you with us, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This
is a fascinating thing. I don't know if we've ever seen a threat come out of the Speaker's House, the Speaker of the House, to sue the United States president. What's this? How does this work?
Well, what Speaker of the House John Boehner has said is that he is willing to stand on the Constitution and take this president, this imperial president, to task. We actually represented Speaker Boehner in filing an amicus brief in the decision last week that came down by the Supreme Court unanimously striking President Obama's attempt to essentially make non-recess appointments. So you can see a pattern here. There's been about over a dozen cases that the Supreme Court has unanimously struck down attempts, overreach attempts by this president. And this would just be one more avenue that Speaker Boehner could take to rein in and control these out-of-control attempts to gain extra power outside of the constitutional system.
I don't think any of us are arguing the fact that this president's imperialistic and certainly violating his constitutional responsibilities by following the checks and balances set forth and even going to Congress on certain. In fact, even yesterday, I mean, the gall of just saying to the Congress, forget you, I'll take care of immigration on my own. And I want to come to that a little bit later on. But really, can you get a lawsuit to do anything while he's still in office? I mean, could this thing get drug out and nobody's ever going to see it? Who's going to prosecute it?
Well, it certainly could be. The system works within Congress where the Speaker of the House has control of a committee. It's made up of two of the leaders from the Republicans, two of the leaders from the Democrats, but also himself. So he would be the tie-breaking vote, where he is able to actually take legal authority. He would have his own attorneys be able to file the case against the president. There are various things that he could allege in that case. The details have not yet come out, but as you just mentioned, there are so many examples of overreach by this president that there are so many ways that he could use such a lawsuit to sue the president. So we've seen, as I just said, in the Canning case where the president was sued for making non-recess appointments, anything that the president would be sued about here, again, the details haven't come out of exactly what he is going to allege, but that would take place, and it may take a few years, but we could get a ruling before the end of the president's term.
Okay. In the meantime, he continues on as if this lawsuit's not even in place. Why don't we, with all due respect, why aren't we impeaching him for abuse of powers?
Well, as Speaker Boehner said, there's essentially three options that Congress has. First would be impeachment, second would be to file a lawsuit, and third would be the power of the purse. Well, we know in the first and third example, impeachment and the power of the purse, while Congress can pass as many laws as they want, when that goes to the Senate, we know what the makeup of the Senate is right now, and the Senate would never vote to impeach the president or to convict the president after an impeachment in the House. So with those examples, the one remaining that the House can take action by itself and doesn't have to wait for the Senate is with a lawsuit. So you could try to impeach the president. It may be a little too strong, a little too far, but the Senate would never go anywhere in the Senate at the current time.
Is that possible if there was a turnover in the Senate after this fall's election?
It's possible, but still very unlikely. We haven't seen the level of high crimes and misdemeanors out of this president. We've seen the ignoring of the Constitution, and a lawsuit is certainly the way to go all the way up to the Supreme Court and could overturn any of President Obama's executive overreach, any of these executive orders where he has essentially said, I don't want to follow the Constitution. Because when he says the system is stacked against, when he's talking about the system, he's talking about the constitutional system of checks and balances. He wants to avoid that. He wants to go against Congress here. And so that's why you're seeing this lawsuit being threatened by Speaker Boehner and going to be filed.
All right. If by chance this is successful and it sticks, does that mean some of these executive orders would be automatically overturned?
That's exactly what it would mean. And again, just using the example of last week in the Canning case with the non-recess appointments, there were over 1,000 rulings of the National Labor Relations Board that were struck down because his appointments to that board were struck down. So these kind of lawsuits have a real effect, make a real difference. And so that's what we're seeing. That's what the direction that we're seeing Speaker Boehner go. And it really could have an impact.
Okay, Hobby Lobby, quite a victory, but yet it's a very narrow opinion. Can you comment on it?
Yeah, it was a tremendous victory for religious liberty. You had a president who essentially said that religious business owners, Christian business owners, had to make a choice between what he considered the cost of doing business or violating their faith. If they refused to violate their faith, he was going to charge them $36,500 per employee per year as a penalty for not providing abortion pills. Now, as you noted, the ruling is somewhat narrow, but the focus of this case, because it was brought by for-profit businesses, so that was the focus of the Supreme Court's ruling in this case. Right. There are a number of other cases brought by nonprofits, Little Sisters of the Poor for one. There are many, many other examples, and those cases will continue. Now, the first case that was decided by the 11th Circuit immediately following, within hours of the Supreme Court's decision in Hobby Lobby, granted an injunction to a nonprofit, a TV station, a Christian TV station, actually, and giving that Christian TV station the ability to not follow the HHS mandate. So we've seen the ripple effects start to come down from the Supreme Court's decision on Hobby Lobby, and that will continue. So there are many cases left, but it sets the precedent that religious liberty cannot be violated.
All right, that's fabulous. All right, well, the president basically has thumbed his nose at Congress and said he's going to take on immigration himself. Do you have any idea what he means by this, what he's going to do?
Well, he's being very vague in what he's talking about. But regardless of what you feel should be done about immigration, the bottom line is the president does not have the authority to go it alone, to thumb his nose at not only Congress, but the Constitution itself. There are checks and balances. There's a separation of power. Any legislation must come through Congress. It cannot be done by executive fiat, by dictation of President Obama, and that's what he's attempting to do here. The various things he's threatening, we don't know exactly how he's going to accomplish it, most likely with executive orders, but those, again, can be challenged. They will be challenged, and this president cannot. He wants to circumvent Congress, but the Constitution is once again in his way.
Matthew, would you say we're in a constitutional crisis? I mean, the very forming of this republic and the Constitution, Declaration, the three branches of government was to prevent a runaway tyrannical president, an imperialistic president. We have one, and our system's not preventing it.
Well, I would actually say that President Obama is attempting to create a constitutional crisis. But thus far, we've seen, over the past week, we've seen 4 different cases striking down various attempts of President Obama to violate the Constitution. So you do have a Supreme Court that is a check to that. You do have Congress that is a check to that. He is attempting to circumvent the system. The system is slow. It takes a long time sometimes for these cases to come down to hold back his power. But the action is being taken, and the system is working. Now, that does not make any excuse for what President Obama is attempting. And certainly the American people need to stand up, have their voices heard, and say, enough of this. We will not allow it. Elections are one way to do it. Calling your member of Congress, writing to the president, all of these things can make a difference. Standing up in the media and having your voice heard really does impact, because President Obama isn't able to get away with whatever he wants if the people stand up and say no.
Thank you. And before I let you go, back to Speaker Boehner's lawsuit, can Attorney General Eric Holder thwart this in any way?
Well, he would be representing President Obama in this case and his whole Department of Justice, but he can't prevent it from actually being filed. So if Speaker Boehner uses the system I described within the House of Representatives to set up through their own attorneys to file this, the Attorney General, would be one situation. This would not run through the DOJ. So Attorney General Holder would not be able to thwart it before it ever got off the ground.
Well, Matthew, thank you for what you do, and Jay and Jordan, the whole crew there. You guys are terrific. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to having you back soon.
Well, thank you, and thanks for covering this.
All right, God bless. All right, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, welcome back. Great to have back with us in the studio today Dave Dotterrer. He is a candidate for the Republican position of he is the Republican candidate, excuse me, for the state Senate here in Southern Oregon, and he's up against now a Democratic incumbent, Alan Bates. Dave, good to see you back. And how's it going, by the way? You say 6,000 doors you've knocked on?
Yeah, just 6,000 plus doors I've knocked on already, and my wife has gone with me on most of them.
Really?
And it's been very eye-opening to talk to people and see what's really on their mind.
Wow.
Yeah. So
quite an experience. Isn't
yeah,
it?
It is. Well, you know, it's funny. You get the chance to you live in a community, and you go into lots of different neighborhoods that you just wouldn't necessarily drive through for for whatever reason. You just if you live in a particular area and you have this route, and you go to Costco, all that kind of stuff. You just don't go with them. It's really interesting, and you get to meet a lot of different people that you wouldn't otherwise normally meet.
What's the number one complaint?
The biggest issue is jobs. Just to tell you a little story, I went to a door the other night, and there was a young man came out, mid-20s, and I'll tell you one thing is very, very clear: the young people are really starting to pay attention. I noticed in the last campaign when I was walking doors, the 20-somethings, yeah, they were nice and everything, but they weren't as engaged as you would think. This time they're really engaged because they see what's happening. So I go to the door and I ask this guy, well, so how are things around with the job issues? And Perry, the guy, he teared up.
Really?
I mean, his eyes welled up, and he said, "It's really been tough the last couple of years." And you'll see that in what we don't realize in Jackson County. I just saw the employment report, and it says that in the last year, the number of employed people in Jackson County has actually gone down, not up, down. And the only reason our unemployment rate's gone down is because 2,000 people have left the workforce. So we're really seeing some problems here, and what people are basically saying is that I don't see Salem doing anything to help us out here.
Wow. All right. Well, let's go over to Cover Oregon just for a moment. Big news, as you know. They finally waved the white flag and going to send it back to the feds.
Yeah.
I guess the first thought that I have, does that preempt the investigation?
No, not at all. I mean, the FBI is still moving forward with their investigation, and they've subpoenaed people. And I just saw the other day that Carol Lawson, who was one of the people that who's been quote accused of doing all these bad things, is working a lawsuit against the state for defamation of character. I mean, she basically is saying, "Look, I was a good soldier. You told me to say these things. I said these good things,
wow.
and now you're blaming me for it,
yeah,
and everything." So, but I was the good soldier. So
wow.
it's pretty eye-opening. I mean, I've actually read the letter from her lawyer to the state of Oregon, and it's eye-opening.
Wow, still a mess. In fact, we had a report the other day that that they were still giving raises within the system. The people sitting around doing nothing, well, to a system that was broken that can't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. The people are saying, like my opponent has said, well, these people have been fired and they've been held accountable. That's not true. That's just not true. I mean, for example, some of the people that are working on it, they were allowed to keep their jobs to the end of June. And they were, you know, the director of Cover Oregon was allowed to keep his job through the end of June, getting paid $14,000 a month. And even though he'd been, quote, laid off a couple months before, well, he's retiring, and he's moving on. You know, it's a pretty cushy deal. Pretty cushy deal for some of these folks.
All right, so what can we do to bring jobs back to Oregon?
Well, I've been sitting down with lots of the different business groups and talking with them about what are the what's the low-hanging fruit out there. What are the things that we really need to stop doing, and what are the things we need to do to bring jobs? And you know, let me say this, that it's not about jobs necessarily at Oregon. Oregon's not doing that badly as a state. It's the rural areas that are doing poorly. The question is, we spend most of our economic development money up in the Portland area. It's not being spent, and we do have programs out there. They're not being instituted in areas like Medford, and there's actually places in Eastern Oregon that are worse off than we are. It's the rural. It's the rural versus urban. I can actually, you know, the income inequality in Oregon is not between rich and poor. It's between urban and rural. That's really true.
Wow.
So,
all right. So, what is the low-hanging fruit? What are you discovering?
Well, some of the things happen to do with land use. We really need to take a look at the way we do land use planning in this state, because what happens is we have this massive state process for doing it, and one size fits all. And it tends to do pretty well for the people up in Portland, but it doesn't work for people in the rural areas. So we really need to give more flexibility in that area. I can tell you that I talked with some folks that were with a small business group, the National Federation of Independent Businesses. That's one of their small business group, and what they basically said was this: you know, it's not any single regulation. It's this broad network and this patchwork of regulations that we've put together that get you stuck in a sticky spider web of regulation. It's just one thing after another. And what this woman said to me was, what you really need to do is go back in and look at your totality of your regulations and ask yourself, okay, are all these really necessary? Because they're often working at counter purposes. So, you know, people say, well, how come you can't come up with that? You know, what's the one thing you could do? Well, you can't do it. It's not that simple. It really is not that simple.
Well, what little I've run into with our new building and things, it's just been amazing.
Really? I mean, amazing. So you're feeling it,
well,
aren't you?
It's amazing. I mean, we're small scale, obviously, compared to companies who want to literally pick up and move here. And I know that there's some incentive programs out there to bring companies into the area and all that. But just to get to the maze of a city and a council and a county is enough to, you kind of go, well, wait a minute, who really is in control? Is it territorial? What's the issue here? Why can't we make getting things done simple?
Yeah, and people think that that's a local issue. Yeah. Actually, it flows from state statute, because there's these state statutes that talk about that local governments, local entities have to have certain processes in place to make sure the following things happen. Well, that's all they're doing. They're responding to what the state has directed them to do. Now, it's very easy to blame them, but they're just doing what they're told also, because it's state law.
All right, so businesses, obviously, you get businesses fired up, they're going to employ people. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. Education continues to get all of the attention and the dollars. Does education have enough money, in your opinion? Do we need to give it any more money?
You know, I think that we're going to have to be very careful about how we hand out that money, but we made a big change this time around. To say they have enough money, I think that at the K-12 level it was addressed this last time, and it was bipartisan to increase the K-12 funding. I will tell you where I think the real problem is at the community college and the associate's degree, and where we transition people into the vocations. That's where most of the jobs are, and that's where we're not putting enough emphasis on it. So I think that you could say, when you talk about money, if it was me, I would put the money into the community colleges, and I would into workforce development kinds of education, because now, for example, the governor has this idea of what he calls pre-K through 20 in the education system. I would make that pre-K through a job, because that's really what you want. Is you want somebody to come out of your education system, and you want them to have gotten either a vocational training or college level, or even if it's just a high school degree, to move on into a job, and we don't do that very well. So
what were some of the other concerns you ran into out there?
Well, it's very, very clear that at least amongst people who would support someone like me, that you know, you got to be very careful using the word change these days. But I can tell you, these people, there's a lot of people out there do not like the direction we're going.
Hope and change.
Yeah, and they don't use those words, but they say, look, we're just heading in the wrong direction. And I say, well, do you think we're headed in the wrong direction, or do you think we're in a downward spiral? They say, you know what? I think we are in a downward spiral. There's a difference between that. If you're 20 degrees off, and that's a rudder bearing. But I got to tell you, you start looking at economically and where this country is and this area is, and you start to see this downward spiral piece. Talking about the jobs that we just talked about. When I met with the teachers, and I've met with a bunch of the teachers and all, they'll talk about the fact that the biggest problem they have is with the socioeconomic conditions in this area and what that means to a child when they come to school. Are they prepared to learn? But it goes back to the socioeconomic. So you start to connect these dots between, wait a minute, we have these issues that are going on with education, but it ties back to, do the parents have a job? Do they have a stable home? And all that cultural and socioeconomic issues that come around. And we've got to address this in its totality. And I'm not seeing the legislature do that. They're not very good at that. I mean, they throw a bunch of bills in the hopper, and people talk about what they're going to fix, but there's not a strategy and a plan behind it.
Can some of these agencies be looked at and saying, wait a minute, they're just too fat?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely,
absolutely.
Whatever happened to administrative overrule? Is that a real possibility?
Well, you know, it was interesting because there was at one point there was a juncture between conservatives and, believe it or not, the public employees unions, and the discussion was that we have too many middle managers in these agencies. Now, of course, the public employees unions wanted to do with middle managers because that was taking away money from their workers, and of course the conservatives saying, look, we're just too top heavy. And we dug into it and came up with some solutions. Well, that was a couple of years ago. We're finding out that it is really difficult to do because there's only so much the legislature can do under the Constitution. What it really takes is it takes the governor saying, wait a minute, I'm the chief executive officer here. This is what we're going to do. And that's a governor's issue. And that's why voting for the governor is so important. Okay. Yeah.
Well, how can people get a hold of you and work with you if they want to?
Well, DaveDotterrer.com. I get is the website, and you can go on there. And when I go to the doors, lots of people say, "Yep, I'll take a sign." People are signing up to walk with me in the Ashland Parade this Friday. We're gonna do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's always an interest. That's always an interesting issue.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, that's exacgly right. I did it 4 years ago, and it was a lot of fun.
That's Dotterrer. Okay, Dotterrer, DaveDotterrer.com. And if you want to get involved in this campaign, well, keep up the good work. Things I'm sure will be a little dormant here for a while, but it'll heat up probably.
It'll heat up. Yep,
real
absolutely.
fast.
Come fall.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Take care.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back. Well, when you watch theDove TV, I'm sure you've caught the program, The Way of the Master. It's one of the most popular programs we run on theDove TV. Co-host with our good friend Kirk Cameron and our good friend Ray Comfort. And Ray has authored a book. It's called Einstein, God, and the Bible, forward by Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis program. And we want to talk to Ray about that today. Ray, good to see you, my friend. But why did you write a book about Einstein? Why not about Hal Short?
It would be a long book for Hal Short. He's a big boy. Yeah, Einstein. It was mainly written because of a frustration that atheists kept lying about Einstein. There's been a tug of war with Einstein while he was alive, and since he died, the tug of war has even got greater. The atheists are pulling on the rope and saying Einstein was an atheist and Einstein was a genius, therefore atheism is very intelligent. But Einstein was not an atheist. He continually said he was not an atheist. He had his own perception of what God was like. So I wrote the book to, well, any book I write, anything I do is to reach the lost. It's just a glorified fat tract and a hard cover to get the gospel into the hands of unsaved people, because I don't want anyone to end up in hell.
Well, you do that very well. You were one of the great apologists of our day. Well, tell us about what he believed. What kind of a believer was he?
He was an idolater. I don't know if I've mentioned before, but atheism is a form of idolatry. What idolaters do is they try and get rid of moral responsibility. Remember Israel, when they made the golden calf, they made a god in their image. And the reason idolatry is so attractive to human beings is because it has no moral dictate. A golden calf will not say, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not lie, shall not steal, etc. So if you could make an image of God that's dumb, you will dance around it with great joy, because you can get into any sin you want and your God doesn't even speak to you about it. Well, we don't often in America make God, I guess we do have a God of gold. It's Wall Street.
Yeah.
You know, you can't serve God and mammon. It's either one or the other. We love money or we love God. But we make a God in our minds. The God of America is a divine butler. Well, that's kind of what Einstein had. He had his own image of God. A God who was lofty, a God who was afar off, a God who doesn't hold you morally accountable for fornication and for adultery and even for lust. So the God of the Bible is extremely offensive to humanity. The Bible says we hate him without cause. We're at enmity against God and against his law because of that moral accountability. Human beings hate God for the same reason a thief or a criminal hates the police. They call them pigs. They will kill a man even though they don't know him because he's wearing a police uniform, because that badge stands for righteousness and justice and truth. And so men hate God without cause. Now, some would say, oh, that's not true. Well, could you explain to me why it's so common to use God's name as a cuss word? Can you think of anyone in history, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Napoleon, Hitler, anyone whose name has been used as a cuss word? They use the name of Jesus Christ as a cuss word. Why? Well, in John 7, Jesus tells us why. He said, the world hates me because I testify of its deeds that they're evil. And so that goes back to that moral accountability. If you can make a God in your own image, then you'll snuggle up to that non-existent, cuddly idol and feel comfortable in your sins. And that's exactly what Einstein did. He was not a fool. He didn't say nothing created everything, as the atheist said. He said there was something that created everything. It just wasn't that moral accountability God that's so annoying.
What did he think of the Bible?
Well, he didn't like the Bible very much, even though he is Jewish. Like everyone else, he believed there were some good things in the Bible, and there certainly are. There are a lot of bad things in the Bible, and people are shocked to hear that, but the Bible doesn't hide men's sins, it exposes them. The Bible is probably one of the most violent books I've ever written. Women having babies cut out of their womb, people's heads lopped off, people killed in mass, babies slaughtered. There's one, I think, I can't remember a guy, his bowels gushed out when his stomach was sliced open. There is stuff in the Bible to give children nightmares because it reveals the evil nature of humanity and warns that God has appointed a day in which he'll judge the world in righteousness. Justice is coming for evil. So Einstein did commend some of the things in the Bible, but the things he didn't like, once again, were the things that pointed to moral accountability. However, there is a paradox in that he thought very highly of Jesus, which is wonderful because Einstein was Jewish, and for him to speak well of Jesus is wonderful. But we mustn't forget that Jesus was Jewish. The The disciples were Jewish. Christianity came from Israel. I'm Jewish, and so there's a lot of Judaism in the foundation of Christianity.
So, what did he think of Jesus's writings, or not his writings, but his sayings, his words?
Well, who could not be astounded at what Jesus said? You just got to stand back and say, who was this man that we take our time from? And there are some people who say Jesus didn't exist, and when I meet them, I just say, what's the date? And they say 2014. I say, since when? And it comes back to since Christ. So if we want to know Jesus existed, we can see historically just because he existed because we take our time from Christ. So he spoke well of Jesus in the sense that his words are undeniably unique. Do unto others as you'd have them do to you. I mean, that's how to make a good marriage work. That's how to make the Los Angeles freeways work. If everybody did to others as they'd like them to do to them. That's how to make nations get on with each other. Although we can't do it, the Beatles tried doing it. All we need is love, and the song they released just before their bitter and angry breakup. So humanity cannot do what the Bible says. We don't have the wherewithal to do it. Other things that Jesus said were just amazing. Anyone who reads the New Testament, Einstein did, has got to come away from it with your eyes open and your mouth open. Especially around John chapter 6, when Jesus said incredible things like, before Abraham was, I am. Things like, I'm the bread of life. He that comes to me shall never hunger, and he that believes on me shall never thirst. Unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you have no life in you. Just amazing words. Obviously, he wasn't speaking of cannibalism. He was speaking spiritually. He said, my words are spirit, they're life. He wasn't talking about physically eating his body and drinking his blood, because when he told his disciples to do that, he was standing right next to them. He was obviously speaking symbolically, which is what the Protestants believe when we have communion. When we take the wine, we're remembering that Jesus shed his blood for us. When we take the bread, remembering his body was broken for us. So obviously Einstein read the New Testament and was aghast and full of admiration for the words of Jesus, except when he said things like, whoever looks upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery already with her in his heart. You know, that was the Bible verse that broke me the night of my conversion.
Really?
Back in 1972. Yeah, I read that. I was on a surfing trip, had a belief in God, but I read that verse and my heart sank. And it wasn't because I had sinned against God. It was because God was putting his finger on my #1 pleasure. See, I was a surfer, and to get pleasure from surfing, I had to dangle my feet as shark bait in cold water. I used to have to run after surf, get the wind right, get the swell right, and then I get pleasure if the surf was good. Same with partying. To get pleasure, we had to enjoy ourselves. To get joy in yourself, you have to party. You have to drink booze and get yourself to that level where you say, I'm now having fun. It's just stupid. Drinking poison. It's just crazy. But when I used to lust after women, as every red-blooded guy does, I didn't have to go searching for the pleasure. It was instantaneous and never-ending. Any woman I looked at, it gave me pleasure because I'd look at her with lust in my heart. And God was saying, that's adultery. And I thought, no, what am I going to live for? But the miracle is, when you become a Christian, God transforms the human heart. So rather than veering towards perverseness, doing that which is wrong, you hunger after righteousness. You thirst after righteousness, which is a miracle for a sin-loving sinner. Mm-hmm. People say, how do you know God is real? Man, the first time I was born, it was radical. I didn't exist, and then I did because God gave me life. The second time I was born, it was just as radical. New heart with new desires, especially the desire to seek after righteousness. That is an absolute miracle. New heart, new desires is what happens when you're born again.
I'll come back to Einstein in a minute, but just to finish your story. So you read that, and then how soon after that were you, did you give your life to Christ?
Well, the young guy that led me to Christ was a new Christian, and he really didn't know what he was doing when we look back in retrospect. He spent 6.5 hours sharing the gospel with me, and I really can't remember what happened during the 6.5 hours. I don't know why. But I remember coming out of that room at 3:30 in the morning, looking up the stars and going, wow, I've never seen them before. The flowers blossomed to God's glory. The birds sung his praises. Everything looked different because I was different. God had opened the eyes of my understanding. I was blind beforehand. I may have shared with you before how I went to interview a young lady at a university. She was in her early 20s, and she was carrying a white cane and tapping her way towards me, and having a spirit of perception, I perceived that she was blind. So I went up to her and I said, "Can I interview you for television?" And she said, "Oh, I'd love that." And so I sat her down and I said, "Can I ask your mum's permission or something?" She gave me a phone call to Mum. Mum said, "Fine." And so the first question I had for her is, "Could you please tell me about blue? What do you think of blue?" And she said, "Blue is a very sad color." I said, "Why do you say that?" She said, "Because people have the blues." And in her little confined dark world, she had no understanding of a gorgeous blue sky, how it's breathtaking when you see the color blue. And that's because she was lacking in light. And that's exactly how I was as an unsaved person. My understanding was darkened. I was alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that was in me because of the blindness of my heart. Jesus said, "Except a man is born again, he cannot see," not will not may not, but cannot see the kingdom of God. We need light. And the Bible speaks of two lights that are very instrumental in our conversion. One is the light of God's moral law. The Bible says the commandment is a lamp and the law is light. If you stay away from the commandments, which is what Einstein did, you'd think you're a good person. You're a man who stays in darkness, never looks in the mirror to see himself in truth. But the light of God's law reveals what we are in truth, that we're liars and thieves and blasphemers and adulterers at heart and fornicators, filled with rebellion against the God that gave us life, filled with unthankfulness and ingratitude that God gave us eyes to see with, ears to hear with, taste buds to enjoy good food. I don't know how anyone can eat a meal without giving God thanks. There's one thing I find disgusting is a little kid, you give him some candy, the kid snatches the candy and stuffs his mouth. That's what I was like for 22 years of my non-Christian life. Never once did I bow and thank God for my food. Man, just take food from me for 3 or 4 days and I'd learn to be thankful, but I was just a fat, spoiled brat before I was a Christian, self-indulgent, until God opened the eyes of my understanding. That's what happens at conversion.
Wow, beautifully said. What a testimony. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back. Our special guest today is Ray Comfort. You see him on the Dove TV with the Way of the Master program. And today we're talking to him about his book, Einstein, God, and the Bible. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back. What a delight to have back with us today Ray Comfort. He's the founder and president and CEO of Living Water Publications. Also, you see him as co-host with The Way of the Master with Kurt Cameron. We air that program here on the Dove TV. He's authored numerous books. He's one of the great apologists of our day. If you've never heard him speak, you've really missed it. If you have heard him speak, you know what I'm talking about. He's authored a book called Einstein, God, and the Bible, and forward by Ken Ham. It's a fascinating read. And Ray, in there, one of the chapters, you quote Einstein, and he says, "It's only to the individual that a soul is given, and the high density of the individual is to serve rather than to rule or to impose himself in any other way." And then you go on and you ask the 7 big questions about God's existence. That's quite a statement by him.
Yeah, it sounds like he believes in the existence of the soul. It's amazing how many people don't. I was once talking to a university professor at UCLA. I was interviewing him on camera. We never used the footage, but he was very antagonistic. And he says, I said, "Do you believe in the soul?" He said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Do you know that the soul and the word life in the Bible are synonymous? Soul and life are synonymous?" He said, "I didn't know that." He said, "Well, I believe in the soul then." He did a complete 180, a reversal. And that's what people need to realize, that soul means life. There's life in this body. If my life left, God forbid, while I'm on the program, you'd be stuck with, I get high ratings, it'd be stuck with just a corpse, an empty shell. And when people die, their soul, the life, leaves the body. and enters into eternity. So it just takes a little bit of thinking and a little bit of knowledge for people to believe in their soul. And Jesus said, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Can I just share something with you about Einstein?
Yeah.
Yesterday I spent the morning in a police car. And the reason I was with the 2 police officers in the car is we're working on a new movie and we're scouting. And
well, you were in the front seat, not in the back seat?
I was in the front seat. My director was in the back seat, which is a good place for him. But they were very, very kind to us. They're going to work with us on this movie. We're going to have a robbery scene. We've got actors, and they're going to use their canine dogs. And while we were sitting there, while my director was out doing this bit, scouting and looking at different things, I gave them the Einstein test. I asked them 4 questions to see if they were intelligent. Would you like me to give you the test?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Spell the word shop.
Shop, S-H-O-P?
Shop. What do you do when you come to a green light?
Stop.
How many of each animal did Moses take into the ark?
2.
Okay. What's the name of the raised print that deaf people use?
Say that again?
Print.
Say
What's
that
the
again?
name of the raised print that deaf people use?
I don't get the question. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, deaf people use raised print to read. What's the name of it?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What's the name of it?
Brill.
Very good. And the last one is spell the word silk.
Silk. S-I-L-K.
What do cows drink?
Milk.
Okay, now you got 4 wrong. You're being humiliated. You're being humiliated on live television.
Thank you so very much.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Spell the word shop. What do you do when you come to a green light? You go at a green light. You don't stop.
Oh,
if you
boy.
do, you're going to cause accidents. How many of each animal did Moses take into the ark? Who built an ark? Noah. Moses didn't take any animals into the ark.
Wonderful. Okay.
What's the name of the raised print deaf people use? Deaf people don't use Braille because they're deaf. They're not blind.
Right.
Blind people use Braille. Spell the word silk. What do cows drink? Water. They can't reach the udder. It's around the back. They're stuck with water. If they have milk, what do they have it on their cereal or what?
Wow.
So these
Remind me not to have you back on the show, will you?
Both police officers did exactly what you did. It's a wonder they let me out of the car. But they laughed. And it brings out an important point, you know. The Bible says, he who trusts his own heart is a fool. You know, we think we're Einsteins, but I guarantee Einstein would have fluffed it too. Our own hearts aren't trustworthy. We see water on a freeway on a hot day. It's not there. We think the sun rises each day. The sun has never risen. The earth turns. We think the sky is blue. Beautiful blue sky. There's no color to the sky. Ask any astronaut if you had to scrape blue off the space shuttle when it came down. There's no color to the sky. The sun doesn't rise. There's no water on the freeway. Our eyes aren't trustworthy. And so it's very important to realize there's only one thing we can really trust, and that's not our natural senses. It's God's promises. When God makes promises, he keeps them. There's one thing many things that God can't do. One of them is he cannot lie. You know, human beings lie through their teeth. That's where the lie comes from, through the teeth. But God can never lie. It's not within his ability to lie. And the Bible says it's impossible for God to lie. And the analogy I often use for that word impossible, if God is omniscient, surely he can lie if he wants to. Omnipotent, God can lie if he wants to, is the use of the word impossible is a very important to understand how it's being used. For instance, it would be impossible for me to eat worms. I mean, I've seen it done on television. A guy put live worms on his toast on live television, and he ate the live worms, big, fat, blood-filled worms on toast. And I looked at it, I thought, ugh, that would be impossible for me to eat. It's so repulsive, so disgusting to me, I could never do it, so I use the strength of the word impossible to substantiate that claim. Well, lying and deceitfulness is so repulsive, so disgusting to God, the Bible uses the word impossible to substantiate that claim. That means you can trust him with all of your heart. You can throw yourself blindfolded and without reserve into his hands because he keeps his promises. He that comes to me, I'll in no ways cast out. If you trust in Jesus, you have everlasting life, without a doubt, because it's impossible for God to lie.
Wow. I'm afraid to ask the next question. I feel pretty stupid right now.
You're normal. I was the same. Guy who put the eraser on the end of the pencil knew what he was doing. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, that's great.
None of us is inflammable. Oops, that was a mistake. Infallible.
Today's National Forget Day, so there's your excuse. So what catapulted Einstein into prominence?
His weird hairstyle. I really think that, seriously, that's got a lot to do with, he says, why is it everybody recognizes me? Come on, this is pre-Beatles era. Yeah. This guy looked like he just got out of bed. His hair was white. He looked like his head was on fire with white flames everywhere he went. I mean, he was an outstanding hairstyle man. And so everybody recognized him. He was a fascinating guy. Here was a Jew from Germany getting world prominence just before the war. And then his theory of relativity, which we all understand, put him into great prominence. So it's just a fascinating character, very, very witty. He said some very fascinating things, none of which I can remember at this very moment. That's why you need to read the book, which, by the way, is written in a New Zealand accent.
Yeah, I can tell that. By the way, it is put out by WND Books, so check it out. Ray, so is he noted for any one particular discovery or anything?
Yeah, the poor guy is linked with the atomic bomb. He was a pacifist who understood that Germany was on its way to making an atomic bomb. And so he wrote a letter to the president. It was very hard to get hold of the president at the beginning or during the war. He wrote a letter with some other scientists to the president. The president, because it was from Einstein, this colorful character who had received so much prominence, he read the letter, and that instigated the Manhattan Project, which was responsible for creating the atomic bomb, which stopped the war, stopped the Japanese, and saved us all ending up speaking Japanese. But so he felt very uncomfortable being known for that. He's also known for his obvious intellect, amazing intellect. You know, Einstein and I have got a lot in common. We look pretty similar when I get out of bed in the mornings. We're both Jews. My heritage is from Poland. Without my beard, I used to look a little bit like Einstein. A lot of people kept telling me that. I was in a plane once. I was actually in an airport, and I gave tracts out to 4 Muslim ladies, and they said, "You look like Einstein." They're all wearing that thing. And I said, "Oh, then thanks a lot." Made me feel good. I went and sat in the plane. As they walked past me, they all called out, "Hey, Einstein," as they walked past. And as they were leaving, an hour later, when we got into Los Angeles airport, the little girl, she was about 7 years old, yelled out, "Goodbye, Frankenstein," which brought me back down to earth. But the only thing we don't have in common is the intellect. Einstein, his name is synonymous. You know, if you're called a Jezebel, obviously as a male you wouldn't be, but if you're a woman, someone calls you a Jezebel or you're called a Judas, it's a great insult. If someone says you're a Hitler, that's a terrible insult. But if someone says you're an Einstein, well, you know, that means I am super intelligent. I can pass the test. So his name is synonymous with intellect. In fact, he makes $10 million a year after death because of his image, believe it or not. He's up there with Elvis and the others who have died, John Lennon, etc. He's a celebrity.
I got less than a minute left. What are you working on? What's your new project?
We're working on this new movie called Audacity. And we've got season 5 we're working on for a television program. We're very excited about that. So I'd love people to get the book, love them to read it, love to pass it on to atheists and let them discover that Einstein was not an atheist.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. You're a blessing and an inspiration. Keep up the good work. Get your TV programming going. We'll air it on the Dove TV.
Thank you very much.
All right, God bless. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today. Check out the book, Einstein, God, and the Bible, Ray Comfort, put out by WND Books. Check it out at the bookstores and get a copy today. We'll see you next time.
I'm Jim, and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. and you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.